Welcome, everyone, to the Republican National Convention, and welcome to an unexpectedly new location for me to do this work this afternoon here on the first day of the Republican National Convention. We had what can I think fairly be described as an unexpected technical meltdown. It went throughout the convention floor. Many television cameras, including the one that I was using. I don't think I'm taking it personally after all went down. So I've had to move throughout the convention floor, find a camera that works so we can continue our conversation and our coverage about the Republican National Convention. It has been, to put a fine point on it, an eventful afternoon. A couple of things have happened. Officially, Donald Trump is the nominee for the Republican National Party, at the Republican National Convention for the Republican Party for the third consecutive presidential cycle. That is history. Never happened before. Same person being the party nominee 3 presidential cycles. And then more news. J.D. Vance, Ohio Senator, 39 years old, just by voice vote, by acclamation, made former President Trump's running mate. That's all happened this afternoon here at the convention. It is in recess now. Part 2 of the first day of the Republican National Convention will start in about an hour and a half. Delegates may filter off the convention floor. They may stay here. It's been an active and engaged afternoon. I want to talk to John Dickerson, my colleague and senior political analyst for CBS News in New York. John, it's been a little bit of movement, a little bit of, let's say, ad-libbing our way through things here, but that's what makes political conventions and live television so endlessly fascinating, at least for me.
That's right. I slid down the pole from my office and plopped into this seat when I was alerted to your technical difficulties there, Major. But at least it's not the days from the early days of convention coverage when floor correspondents had to wear packs on their backs like the ones the astronauts wore when they landed on the moon in order to get coverage going. So at least we have that going for us.
Yes, we can move a bit more nimbly and do so with fewer pieces of baggage. I just bring my standard emotional baggage, none of any other kind.
So, Major.
So, John,
yeah.
I like your thoughts on this afternoon as it's played out. We have so many things to talk about. First of all, Donald Trump, third time in a row, that's history. J.D. Vance, the next generation of the Make America Great movement, and those two are the big headlines from this afternoon.
Let's start with the first one. As you pointed out, history within the Republican Party, 3 straight nominations. Nixon did it, but he had that interregnum there between 60 and 68. But it's extraordinary to me, before the awful events of Saturday, going into this convention, there was a kind of unity behind Donald Trump that it was very hard for me to go back and find unity that unanimous. When you think about some of the most exciting convention fights in past history, they've been in the Republican ranks. 76, Reagan and Ford; 52, Eisenhower and Taft; 64, Rockefeller and Goldwater. These were conventions of the frothy, exciting exchange of ideas and back and forth between candidates who wanted their party's nomination, and they played out for everybody to watch. All of that history's gone. Unanimity behind Donald Trump. And then it's, of course, extraordinary that there's unanimity given what some of the major players in the Republican Party said about Donald Trump just after January 6th. Mitch McConnell, who I gather got some raspberries in the reception there today, said that Donald Trump was morally and practically responsible for the attack on the Capitol. Despite that history, he's the nominee. So that's just extraordinary. Then J.D. Vance, a fascinating pick, and particularly with respect to the focus on, the rebalancing of the economic opportunity in America. How much will that be a part of the argument, or will it just be we're on your side and there won't be a lot of specifics about what does it mean to reorient the economy towards the working class voter that he says he represents? He's said favorable things about the Biden administration's antitrust efforts against the Amazon and Google and Apple and others. Is that something they'll talk more about? You could imagine the Republican coalition which has some businesses in it that might not agree with some of those economic policies, finding some tension if that becomes a part of the conversation. Who knows if it actually will? But certainly in those pictures that are running right now of J.D. Vance, he's getting a good reception on the floor. And that's probably the first thing you want to do if you're a vice presidential nominee.
John, stay with us just one moment. I want to bring in Congressman Mike Lawler from New York. Congressman, great to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Major.
You bear a slight resemblance to J.D. Vance, President Trump's pick as the nominee. I wanted to get first your reaction to J.D. Vance being added to the Trump ticket.
Well, look, obviously, as you talked about, a new voice, a first millennial on a presidential ticket ever. This is a guy who grew up from humble beginnings. His grandmother was a Blue Dog Democrat. Right. Grew up in the Rust Belt, obviously, enlisted in the U.S. Marines.
Wrote a best-selling book about not only his family, but the economic privations that affected the region in which he grew up, which he thought reflected some kind of indifference from Washington about the fate of that part of the country.
Absolutely, and that's part of the country that's going to determine who the next president is. You know, the Rust Belt, Appalachia, will have a tremendous impact, starting Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Ohio, obviously. So, you know, he obviously comes from a part of the country that is going to have a big say in the outcome of this election. Again, this is a guy who enlisted in the U.S. Marines after 9/11, served in Iraq, came back home, created a successful venture capitalist business, has his law degree from Yale, obviously has risen pretty quickly in Republican politics. I will say my beard's a little better, but hey, you can't win them all.
Duly noted.
But
duly noted.
Look, I think he obviously is going to bring a fresh perspective and a voice for the working class in this country, who, you know, frankly have hurt under Joe Biden's policies. The cost of groceries, the cost of gasoline, the cost of a home, the cost of rent has gone up astronomically in this country under Joe Biden. And obviously the migrant crisis at our southern border, 10 million migrants coming into our country since Joe Biden took office, larger than the state of Ohio, in which J.D. Vance represents.
I want to ask you, Congressman Lawler, about the evolution of J.D. Vance. Anyone who does a quick internet search, types in J.D. Vance, Trump 2016, can find a laundry list of pretty tough criticisms. His rhetoric was rhetorical heroin. He said he might be America's next Hitler. He was someone who said, hey, I know this part of the country. I know their difficulties, and Trump is kind of conning them into thinking he can do more than he actually will be able to. That rhetoric has not only subsided, J.D. Vance has become one of the most articulate and forceful exponents now of the Trump approach to not only rhetoric but policy. Talk to me about that evolution. What does it say, not only about J.D. Vance, but the modern Republican Party under President Trump?
Well, look, as you'll recall, during the 2020 presidential primaries, Kamala Harris said a lot of things about Joe Biden, including basically calling him a racist. So, look, things get said during the course of campaigns.
But J.D. wasn't a politician back then.
Things get said.
He was like an observer, speaking on behalf of his people.
During the course of the campaign, things get said about candidates all the time. I think at the end of the day, Donald Trump's record during his tenure in terms of job creation, in terms of economic growth prior to COVID causing that shutdown here in America, his foreign policy, his policy in terms of securing the border. Those are the issues that matter to the American people. Frankly, I don't think most people are going to care what someone said 8 years ago. I think they're going to care about what the policies are that are going to impact their life in this election. And I think when, at the end of the day, when this election is decided, it's going to be decided by the American people based on what they saw during Donald Trump's 4 years versus what they've seen during Joe Biden's 4 years. That's going to be the determinative factor.
From your vantage point, Congressman Lawler, what effect have the events of the last 36 to 48 hours had on this convention and the future of this campaign?
Look, but for the grace of God, we'd be having a very different discussion right now.
A very different convention. A very different
millimeters difference. And so, you know, obviously everyone is grateful that President Trump survived that assassination attempt. This is a time for moral clarity in our country, for Americans, regardless of your political party or view, to come together around a simple premise. Elections should be decided by votes at a ballot box, not by violence at a rally. And whatever our political differences are, and there's many in this country, and whatever our differences are in policy, we can have that robust debate and still respect each other as Americans. The rhetoric needs to stop. Donald Trump is not going to destroy our democracy if he's the next president of the United States. He's not a fascist. Yes, we have deep differences of opinion. By the way, even within the Republican Party, we have differences of opinion at times. You fight those out through ideas. You don't fight them out through violence. And to me, I think what you're going to see this week is a unified Republican Party because America deserves leadership. They deserve unity focused on the issues that matter to the American people. Whether you're talking about the economy, whether you're talking about the border, whether you're talking about foreign policy, we have a lot of challenges right now, and we have to focus on solutions, not division, not overheated rhetoric that seeks to demonize one candidate or one party. All of us have a responsibility in that.
I'm sure you would agree with me, Congressman Lawler, that election results should not be contested with violence on the steps of the United States Capitol or inside the Capitol or at the doors of the House or Senate either.
No, listen, I was the first member of the New York State Assembly to put out a statement condemning what happened on January 6th. I have been very clear, whether it was January 6th, whether it was those who took control of a federal courthouse in Portland, whether it was those who burned a police station in Minneapolis, violence of any kind, political violence of any kind, should be universally condemned and rejected. We should always debate our issues through public discourse and debate and discussion and through legislation. That's what we have the ability to do. Our vote is the way to exercise our political differences,
and the way to
not
confer
violence.
and the way to confer authority.
Absolutely.
In a peaceful democratic process.
Absolutely.
Congressman Mike Lawler, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time.